Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to our channel, Pakistan Zindabad, the next world superpower. Today, we are setting aside the maps, the traditional battle lines, and the conventional geopolitical analysis.
We're diving headfirst into a new reality of conflict.
The invisible battlefield. This is episode 34, and our deep dive today is drawn directly from the strategic thinking in the book, The Nuclear Umbrella, written by Mr. Zaheer Ahmad Meer.
That's right. It's a massive strategic shift, and our mission today is to really unpack its architecture. We're looking at Volume 4 of the Blueprint series, which is all contextualized by that book.
And the central theme here, the core idea we're exploring, is the establishment of what's sometimes conceptually called a Muslim NATO.
Right, and specifically how this framework plans to construct a digital shield to guarantee what it calls digital sovereignty for the nations involved.
Okay, let's unpack that term right there. Digital sovereignty, it's a big concept. What are we actually talking about?
Well, at its core, it's the ability for a nation to defend, to operate, and crucially, to make independent decisions in these absolutely critical domains of cyber and space.
Independent decisions, that's the key. Now, the introduction to this source material, it lays out a really stunning premise. It argues that the whole measure of power has fundamentally changed.
It's completely shifted.
It's no longer about who has the biggest navy or, the largest standing army.
Not anymore. Power today is redefined entirely by who controls data, spectrum, and orbit. I mean, that's the new strategic high ground. Full stop.
Data, spectrum, and orbit.
Yes. If you don't control these invisible lifelines, then the capability of your conventional military, your economy, your entire civil governance structure is, well, it's entirely vulnerable.
And this isn't some abstract future threat, is it? The source material is brutally clear about the consequences of failure. They're immediate, they're catastrophic.
Oh, absolutely. This isn't theoretical at all.
So if the networks go down, what exactly are we risking? What's on the line?
We're risking systemic collapse. I mean, there's no softer way to put it. The modern state is this incredibly complex web of interconnected networks.
It's all tied together.
It's all tied together.
Yeah.
You lose those networks and you instantly lose command and control. That's the ability to direct your military or even just basic emergency responses. It's gone.
Okay, so the state is essentially deaf and blind.
Instantly.
Yeah.
Then the financial sector becomes paralyzed. Trade halts. Critical services like energy distribution, they just fail. You're talking about widespread cascading blackouts.
And when those systems fail, the physical things they manage, the lights, the communication towers, they all go dark.
You go dark.
Yeah.
But maybe the deepest, the most difficult damage to repair is the complete erosion of public trust.
That's the one you can't just flip a switch to fix.
No. Once a populace realizes their government cannot guarantee the stability of their daily life, their money, their power, their safety, then sovereignty itself is fundamentally compromised. It's an existential crisis.
That really sets the scale for us. This isn't just about defending against some hackers in a basement. This is about defending the very foundation of the modern state.
Exactly. And so the creation of this digital shield is framed not as an option, but as an existential necessity. It's about transitioning strategic defense from the physical border to the digital backbone of the nation.
All right, so let's start with the nature of this new fight. The sources open with a striking observation, a bit chilling, really. Modern wars are often fought without tanks crossing borders.
That's the image we all have in our heads, but it's becoming obsolete.
Right. The conflict now unfolds in networks, in satellites, in these massive data centers, undersea cables, and even in the algorithms that run our lives.
And this makes the conflict almost invisible to the civilian eye. You don't see it happening until the consequences, the loss of power, the loss of communication, suddenly become impossible to ignore.
This trend is validated in, well, pretty much every major conflict of the last decade, isn't it?
In every single one. What's absolutely crucial to understand, and the source emphasizes this, is that cyber intrusions invariably precede kinetic action. They are the 21st century version of reconnaissance and artillery preparation.
So it's the intelligence and preparation phase. Attackers are using these sophisticated network penetrations to achieve specific goals that shape the battlefield long before the first shot is fired in the physical world.
Exactly. You're mapping defenses, you're prepositioning malware, you're disrupting logistics chains. You're essentially preparing the kill chain digitally before the kinetic phase even begins.
Okay, let's break down the inventory of invisible threats this framework identifies. We need the specifics, I think, for you, the listener, to really grasp the scale of this new front line.
The list is comprehensive because the threat surface is just so vast.
Yeah.
But let's start with the highest impact terrestrial threat, That's typically cyber intrusions into power grids.
And we're not just talking about a simple power outage, are we? Like a blackout from a storm.
Not at all. We're talking about the deliberate, malicious manipulation of the operational technology, the OT that actually controls the grid.
OT, not IT. That's an important distinction.
A huge distinction. We're talking about the SCADA systems, supervisory control and data acquisition. A sophisticated attacker can breach the corporate IT networks, the email servers, and then pivot to these far more sensitive OT networks.
And once they're in the OT network,
They can cause physical, kinetic damage. They can manipulate controls to spin turbines out of sync, overload transformers, or damage generators. We're talking about causing prolonged, coordinated regional blackouts that can take weeks or months to repair because the physical equipment is destroyed.
So it's economic sabotage and strategic paralysis all rolled into one. And these OT systems, I've heard they're often legacy infrastructure, right? They weren't really designed with modern security in mind.
That's a critical point. They are uniquely vulnerable. They often run on proprietary decade-old software that is incredibly difficult to patch. And because they have to operate continuously, 2-2-7, they're often connected to networks in ways that would, frankly, violate every modern security principle.
So you're dealing with two vastly different and equally vulnerable network architectures at the same time.
Simultaneously. It's an immense challenge.
Okay, let's move from the ground up to the orbital domain. This is the command and control infrastructure for the entire world. The threats there are very specific. The framework mentions satellite jamming and spoofing. What's the tactical difference?
It's a great question. Jamming is essentially brute force. Think of it as a denial-of-service attack in the sky.
Just overwhelming noise.
Exactly. The attacker broadcasts an incredibly powerful, focused radio signal on the same frequency as the legitimate satellite signal. This noise just overwhelms the signal-to-noise ratio at the receiver on the ground, and it makes the satellite communications unusable. It's disruptive, but it's also relatively easy to detect and locate the source of the jamming.
Spoofing, on the other hand, sounds more subtle, more insidious.
Far more insidious. Spoofing is deception. Instead of just sending noise, the attacker sends a legitimate-looking signal that contains false data.
So you think you're getting a real signal, but it's a lie.
Precisely. In the case of GPS, they can transmit fake coordinates or, just as importantly, fake timing information. This causes the victim's receiver on a drone, a ship, a guided missile to calculate its position incorrectly.
The implications of that are terrifying.
They are. You could deceive a drone into thinking it's 100 miles away from its actual location, completely sabotaging its mission. Or, even more critically, you could confuse a targeting system into firing at the wrong place. Spoofing is a strategic attack on integrity and trust in your own systems.
And the consequence of successful spoofing or jamming brings us to the next threat: GPS denial. We tend to underestimate our reliance on GPS because it's so ubiquitous. We think of our car's navigation.
Right, we think of maps. But its role in the global financial system is far less obvious and far more critical. It's all about timing synchronization. GPS satellites carry extremely precise atomic clocks. Every modern high-speed financial transaction, especially things like high-frequency trading, relies on nanosecond-level timestamps that are provided by GPS.
So if you deny or corrupt that timing signal,
The entire financial network loses synchronization. That can lead to corrupted ledgers, failed transactions, and the potential for massive market manipulation or, frankly, an instant catastrophic collapse. It's a financial weapon that works far faster than traditional economic sanctions ever could.
so it's not just our military logistics that rely on GPS, it's the microscopic gears of the entire global economy. That's a huge systemic risk.
A massive one. And beyond that, we also face more direct disruption, like financial network disruption.
Which targets the infrastructure itself?
Yes, the systems that actually move money. The SWIFT system, national banking rails, stock exchanges, interbank communication links. Disrupting these can cause instant panic, bank runs, capital flight, and the freezing of global supply chain payments. It's an incredibly powerful asymmetric tool.
You can bring a major economy to its knees without a single physical asset being harmed.
Not a single one.
And of course, to control the flow of information during a crisis, the framework identifies the threat of telecom shutdowns.
This is a classic move. Cutting off mobile and internet communication is essential for isolating populations, denying citizen organization, and, most crucially, disrupting your opponent's command and control capabilities.
If military units can't securely talk to their headquarters, or if emergency services can't coordinate,
The response just collapses immediately. It's chaos.
And finally, there's the long-term sort of slow burn attack on sovereignty, data theft and manipulation.
This is the quiet warfare that happens over years. Data theft is what we usually hear about: stealing industrial secrets, corporate intellectual property, sensitive biometric data, details of government and military personnel. It's espionage at scale.
But the source argues manipulation is actually worse.
Arguably, yes. Because if an adversary can secretly inject false information into your intelligence databases, if they can alter historical records in your archives or corrupt your internal planning data, they can fundamentally skew a nation's decision-making process over years.
You're making decisions based on faulty intelligence that you think is your own.
Exactly. You're eroding political and strategic coherence from the inside out. It's an attack on the collective reality of a nation.
So what we've detailed here is this comprehensive spectrum of attack. It ranges from immediate physical destruction via SCADA systems all the way to the subtle, long-term corruption of information. It really confirms that these invisible layers are, in fact, the primary theater of operations now.
Without a doubt.
Now that we've fully mapped out the battlefield, let's turn the lens inward. If these are the threats, why is this digital shift so uniquely dangerous for the nations that are conceptualized in this coalition?
That's the right question. It brings us to the crucial discussion of digital dependence, which the source explicitly links to what it calls strategic exposure.
Digital dependence, what's the core issue there?
The core issue is that rapid digitalization, which is absolutely necessary for economic development, has forced many developing nations to adopt infrastructure without owning the underlying technology.
They've prioritized speed and low cost over what? Sovereignty and security.
Precisely. And
Yeah.
this reliance, this dependence, translates directly into strategic exposure and massive coercion risk. You are literally building your national critical infrastructure on someone else's proprietary foundation.
So let's dive into the specifics of these vulnerabilities. The first one listed is, well, it's paramount in the modern era: foreign cloud dependence.
This is a huge one. When governments or critical infrastructure providers use external cloud providers, and we're typically talking about massive entities domiciled in adversarial or, let's say, competing jurisdictions, they are handing over the keys to their most sensitive data.
And that data is then subject to the laws of that foreign country, not their own.
Exactly. Take the U.S. Cloud Act, for example. It allows U.S. law enforcement, under specific circumstances, to compel U.S.-based tech companies to provide stored data, regardless of where on the planet that data is physically located.
So for a nation relying on that cloud, it means a foreign power could potentially access critical government data, health records, even military plans, without the reliant nation's consent.
It's an information security and a jurisdictional nightmare. It completely undermines sovereignty.
And the defense of that data is often outsourced as well, which leads to the next vulnerability: outsourced cybersecurity.
And this creates a fundamental conflict of interest. If you're trusting external non-sovereign actors, often these huge global firms, to handle your national cyber defense and threat intelligence, who are they really working for?
Their primary allegiance is to their shareholders and their home government, not to you.
Of course. So if that external firm is pressured by its government to, say, overlook specific threat vectors originating from their home country, or if they're mandated to provide incomplete data on an ongoing attack, the victim nation is deliberately blinded at the most critical moment.
So digital defense must be a sovereign capability. You can't outsource it.
You absolutely cannot.
And linking back to our earlier discussion, the space domain dependency is just as acute: external satellite reliance.
It's the same problem, just in orbit. If a nation doesn't have its own sovereign satellite communications, SATCOM, or Earth observation assets, it is entirely reliant on infrastructure controlled by foreign powers.
And in a crisis, that foreign power can just pull the plug.
They can simply choose to degrade the service, deny access, or shut down the feed entirely. This effectively cuts off the reliant state's eyes and ears. It paralyzes its ability to conduct military operations, manage disaster relief, or even just communicate securely between government agencies. It is the ultimate veto power over a nation's strategic mobility.
Then we hit a really deep technical challenge: proprietary black box systems. This speaks to a systemic lack of internal knowledge about a nation's own infrastructure.
This is a devastating point, especially in that operational technology domain we talked about with the power grids. A black box system means the source code and the internal mechanics are hidden from you. You don't know how it works.
So governments are buying these expensive, critical systems for their nuclear plants, their air traffic control.
And they cannot audit the software for hidden backdoors, undocumented maintenance ports, or zero-day vulnerabilities. They're operating entirely on faith.
Faith in a foreign vendor.
Faith in the benevolence and the perfect competence of a foreign vendor. Digital sovereignty demands that a nation must be able to verify every single line of code that controls its critical functions. Without that transparency, you're always vulnerable.
And finally, even when the will to defend exists, domestic weaknesses often complicate the response. The source points to fragmented cyber laws.
Right. Effective cyber defense requires immediate, unified action across military, intelligence, finance, and energy sectors. It has to be seamless.
But if the legal frameworks are inconsistent, if one ministry can't share threat data with another because of, say, provincial laws or conflicting regulations.
The defense becomes fragmented into slow, reactive silos.
Yeah.
And attackers thrive on that. They exploit those jurisdictional gaps.
Yeah.
You need a unified legal architecture to enable the kind of coordinated defense, rapid attribution, and consistent prosecution that makes a central command like the MCDC even possible.
So if we synthesize all of this, the problem isn't just who attacks you, but also who you rely on to operate and defend yourself in the first place.
That's the heart of it. The result is clear: strategic exposure and increased coercion risk.
So external powers gain leverage over you.
Absolutely. They can threaten to cut off proprietary software updates, deny access to your cloud services, or halt your satellite communications simply to achieve a political or economic goal.
All without ever having to fire a shot.
Not a single one. And the only real defense against this kind of modern coercion is self-sufficiency, which, of course, brings us to the MCDC.
Right. If digital dependence is the Achilles heel, then the proposed countermeasure is the establishment of the Muslim Cyber Defense Command, or MCDC. This is designed to be the unified answer to that fragmented defense we just talked about.
It is. The MCDC is conceptualized as a multinational fusion center that operates in real time. Its primary goal is to pool the collective cyber capabilities and intelligence of all the member states.
So it's designed to overcome that fragmentation. The incompatible tech standards, the lack of trust that prevents data sharing, the inconsistent legal definitions of what even constitutes an attack.
That is precisely what it aims to eliminate. By centralizing command, training, and threat analysis, the defensive strength of the entire coalition is magnified. It creates a deterrent effect that's far greater than the sum of its individual parts.
So let's get practical. Let's look at the operational mandates. What are the specific, actionable functions of this command center running 2.47?
Okay. First and foremost is continuous active threat hunting. It's mandated for monitoring threats 247. This isn't passive. It involves sophisticated AI-driven analytics that are constantly looking for precursors to zero-day attacks, anomalous lateral movement inside compromised networks, and suspicious activity logs across the critical infrastructure of all member states simultaneously.
So you're not just waiting for an alarm to go off, you're actively looking for trouble before it starts.
You're anticipating and preempting an attack cycle. But of course, when an attack does hit, the MCDC has to manage a multi-front response.
And that's its critical coordinating role.
Yes, coordinating incident response across multiple nations and sectors. Imagine an attack that simultaneously targets a bank in Nation A, a telecom provider in Nation B, and a power company in Nation C, all using the same exploit.
A coordinated campaign.
The MCDC acts as the operational nerve center. It ensures that the localized defense actions in one country don't interfere with, or worse, inadvertently expose another nation's systems. It requires a unified communication chain that cuts right across typical ministry and national boundaries.
The efficiency of a coalition defense like this hinges entirely on rapid, seamless information exchange. That usually proves to be the hardest part of any alliance.
It's always the hardest part. That's why sharing indicators of compromise IOCs rapidly is mandatory and, in this framework, likely automated.
An IOC being?
What?
What, exactly?
It could be a specific hash signature of a new piece of malware, a malicious IP address that attacks are coming from, a command and control server domain. It's the digital fingerprint of the attack.
So that fingerprint has to be shared instantly.
It must be instantly validated by the MCDC and then pushed out to the defensive platforms of all member states. This means a vulnerability exploited in one country is immediately blocked across the entire coalition, which denies the attacker the ability to just reuse that same exploit over and over again. This capability requires immense technical and political trust.
And trust is built through preparation, through practice. What's mandated to ensure that the systems, and more importantly the people, can actually handle a high-complexity attack.
The mandate includes conducting joint cyber exercises to test readiness. And these have to move beyond simple tabletop simulations.
This isn't a board game.
No, They must be live-fire, red team exercises that stress test the complex multi-vector attacks we discussed, simultaneously hitting SCADA systems, financial rails, and satellite uplinks. The goal is to stress test not just the technology, but the human and political protocols for sharing information and delegating authority during a rapidly escalating crisis.
And the defensive priorities must remain fixed on those points of greatest societal failure.
Yes, the MCDC is explicitly mandated to protect critical infrastructure, power, finance, telecom. Resources, budget, and the best personnel must be prioritized to secure these sectors because they are the force multipliers for stability.
If the lights stay on, the banks work, and people can communicate.
The state maintains control and public confidence, even while it's under severe military or political pressure from the outside.
Let's pivot now to the MCDC's philosophical bedrock. Its guiding doctrine is stated as defensive by default, resilient by design. It sounds like a rejection of the traditional build a bigger firewall approach to security.
It's a much more mature evolution of security thinking. Defensive by default implies proactive hardening, things like adopting zero-trust architectures, enforcing minimum privilege access, and ensuring security controls are baked in from the start, not bolted on later. You start with the assumption that your network is already hostile.
Okay, so you assume you're already compromised.
You assume breach. But the resilient by design component is the real strategic shift. It accepts the reality that motivated, well-resourced, nation-state adversaries will eventually breach your perimeter. It's inevitable.
So resilience means preparing for and being able to operate through a penetration. It's not about preventing it entirely.
Exactly. Resilience means ensuring that when a breach occurs, the system can compartmentalize the damage immediately, shunt traffic to redundant systems, maintain essential function, even if it's degraded function, and crucially, recover swiftly.
So the goal shifts from trying to prevent 100% of intrusions, which is impossible,
To guaranteeing continuity of service and restoring full operation within hours, not days or weeks, after a successful attack.
This philosophy, acknowledging that failure is inevitable but planning for immediate recovery, seems to be the most critical element in countering that long-term systemic risk we talked about.
I believe it is.
We've established the unified defense mechanism for terrestrial networks. Now we have to extend that digital shield to the ultimate high ground orbit. Satellites are just indispensable. They're the backbone for command, for communications, for intelligence. If you lose them, you lose the ability to project power or manage a crisis.
Absolutely. And the source material dedicates significant attention to this because, frankly, without secure access to space, digital sovereignty is impossible. The core objective here is achieving what's called Space Situational Awareness, or SSA.
SSA, that means knowing what's up there.
It means comprehensive knowledge of what is in orbit, its current status, and any potential threats to your assets. Whether those threats are kinetic, like a piece of debris, or electronic, like a jamming platform, it's a foundational intelligence capability.
So what specific protective measures are mandated to ensure this space resilience?
First, the framework calls for the implementation of shared early warning systems for space threats. This requires a network of ground-based radars, optical sensors, and perhaps even space-based tracking assets that are constantly monitoring the orbital environment.
So if a potentially hostile satellite starts to maneuver toward one of your critical communications assets,
This system needs to flag that trajectory and intention instantly, giving you time to take evasive action with your own satellite.
the concept of resilience applies directly here too, especially when it comes to capacity. The source talks about satellite redundancy and rapid replacement.
This is the physical insurance policy for your space assets. Redundancy means having sufficient backup satellites, maybe in different orbits or in entirely different constellations, that are ready to pick up the load immediately if a primary asset is lost or disabled.
And rapid replacement.
That means ensuring that any capability gaps are measured in days or weeks, not months or years. This requires standardized, quickly manufacturable satellite platforms and, just as importantly, assured access to launch capacity. That might be through commercial services or dedicated sovereign launch vehicles that can deploy replacements swiftly.
Okay, now let's talk about securing the links themselves, protecting the data that's flowing up and down from the satellite.
This is critical. You need protected uplinks and encrypted downlinks. The uplink is the command path from the ground. Protecting it ensures that only authorized ground stations can maneuver, command, or shut down the satellite.
And the downlink.
Encryption on the downlink is paramount. Every packet of reconnaissance data, every operational command must be strongly encrypted to prevent signal interception, manipulation, or just harvesting by external intelligence agencies. This stops the adversary from listening in on your most sensitive communications.
And how do you address the electronic warfare threat, specifically the jamming we discussed earlier?
That requires deploying highly specialized anti-jamming protocols. These are technically very complex and involve a lot more than just boosting the power of your signal.
What are we talking about then?
We're talking about sophisticated digital signal processing, adaptive antenna arrays that can electronically null out the direction of the jamming signal, and critically, frequency hopping.
Frequency hopping, that's where the signal jumps around.
Yes, the satellite and the ground receiver change their communication frequency hundreds or even thousands of times per second in a pre-synchronized, pseudo-random sequence. This makes it almost impossible for a fixed-frequency jammer to maintain contact across the entire transmission band.
The complexity there sounds immense. The receiver and the transmitter have to stay in near-perfect sync even while they're under attack.
Indeed. If the synchronization fails, the system essentially jams itself. It requires extremely precise timing, which loops us right back to the need for a secure timing infrastructure, often relying on hardened, anti-spoofing GPS or sovereign alternatives.
And finally, there's just the physical reality of a very crowded orbit. The source mentions orbital debris monitoring.
This is essential mission assurance. The threat posed by kinetic anti-satellite weapon tests and just the sheer volume of space junk means every satellite is constantly at risk of a catastrophic impact.
A tiny piece of paint traveling at orbital speeds can destroy a satellite.
It can. So monitoring this debris allows operators to predict potential collisions and execute avoidance maneuvers for their high-value assets. This is the difference between losing a billion-dollar satellite and avoiding it safely.
So the overall outcome of these layered space defenses is clear. Achieving continuity under attack in the orbital domain. The ability to guarantee communications, even when you're being actively targeted, is the highest form of space resilience.
That's the goal.
We've established the strategy with the MCDC and extended the defense to space. Now let's pivot to the really heavy lifting, the technical solutions. The goal is to move entirely away from that dangerous digital dependence we outlined earlier by building a completely new, robust technological base, the digital sovereignty stack.
This is a project of immense scale and, frankly, immense expense. But it's seen as the ultimate expression of digital independence.
So building a sovereign stack means creating technology that is fundamentally auditable, controllable, and under your own national jurisdiction.
Exactly. It removes the ability of external powers to leverage sanctions or simply turn off your critical national infrastructure because you don't control it.
Let's break down the foundational components of this stack, starting from the ground up, where the data physically lives. The source specifies regional data centers.
This seems simple, but it's absolutely foundational. Regional data centers ensure that core governmental data, citizen data, military data, it all remains geographically secure and firmly under national jurisdiction.
This directly addresses that Cloud Act-style vulnerability we talked about.
It's the direct counter. By housing the data within sovereign territory, it is protected by national laws and physically secured by national forces. This guarantees resilience against both legal and physical seizure by external powers.
Okay, moving higher up the stack to the brains of the machine. Secure operating systems.
The operating system, the OS, is the master key to any computer system. Reliance on proprietary foreign OS platforms just introduces an unacceptable level of risk.
So you develop your own.
You develop or adopt secure operating systems, which are often based on heavily modified and hardened open source foundations. This allows coalition engineers to audit every single line of code. They can remove potential backdoors, tailor security features specifically to national needs, and ensure that no foreign intelligence agency has built-in, unpatchable access to their foundational infrastructure.
Transparency at the OS level is non-negotiable for true sovereignty.
It's an absolute requirement.
And the hosting environment for all new applications, sovereign clouds.
A sovereign cloud is a completely trusted, national-scale infrastructure for processing and storage. Unlike a standard commercial cloud, a sovereign cloud ensures the entire architecture, the hardware, the virtualization layers, the software, the networking, is managed exclusively by trusted national or MCDC-vetted entities.
And this eliminates the strategic risk of a foreign entity just shutting down your access during geopolitical tensions.
Yes, and it also ensures that your most sensitive AI models, your big data processing, and your core government applications are running on guaranteed, non-compromised infrastructure.
Now to what might be the most sensitive component of all, indigenous encryption.
This is critical. Indigenous encryption means developing your own cryptographic algorithms, protocols, and implementation tools internally within the coalition's secure environment.
And the core reason for that is to avoid backdoors in foreign cryptographic tools.
Exactly. History has shown time and again that intelligence agencies exert immense pressure on commercial companies to insert deliberate, subtle vulnerabilities into their encryption products. It gives them a silent means of interception.
So if a nation relies on its own publicly audited indigenous encryption,
It can guarantee that only its trusted entities possess the keys to its communications. It eliminates the risk of systemic, built-in espionage.
and finally, we get down to the very atoms and silicon upon which all this code runs. Trusted hardware supply chains. This seems like a monumental task given how globalized technology manufacturing is.
It is the new frontier of deep security risk. Hardware implants, malicious chips or components embedded during the manufacturing process, can compromise a system before the software even loads.
So how does a coalition of nations even begin to tackle a globally distributed problem like this?
Building trusted hardware supply chains requires meticulous auditing and control over every component, from the server chips and networking gear right down to the smallest integrated circuit. It requires investment in indigenous assembly, manufacturing, or at the very least, sophisticated national testing facilities.
So facilities that can subject every piece of critical hardware to rigorous forensic analysis.
Yes, looking for anomalous heat signatures, unexpected radio frequency emissions, or unauthorized components on the circuit boards. It means moving away from relying on commodity hardware for your most critical systems and building relationships with trusted, sovereign-controlled fabrication plants.
It's a hugely expensive process.
Hugely expensive, but the cost of a compromise at the hardware level is far, far higher.
The strategic impact of achieving this complete integrated stack is profound. It fundamentally changes the balance of power.
It absolutely does. Achieving this stack significantly reduces sanctions leverage and shutdown risks imposed by external powers. If a nation controls its own data centers, its own operating systems, its own cryptography, and its own hardware supply chain, it cannot be crippled by a foreign government simply turning off a cloud service or refusing to sell critical hardware.
It moves the nations from being digital subjects to truly sovereign digital actors.
That's the entire goal.
It's time to ground all this theory in practice. I think you, the listener, need to understand how this integrated defense structure and that resilient by design doctrine actually work when the lights go out.
Let's make it concrete.
Let's look at the crisis scenarios detailed in the source material, starting with Scenario A, a grid cyber attack. A successful penetration of a power grid's OT network has happened.
This scenario tests the speed and coordination of the MCDC. The speed of the response is absolutely everything, because the goal is to prevent a cascade failure across the entire grid.
So a breach is confirmed. What's the immediate decisive first step?
The immediate critical first step is the immediate isolation of the affected segment. This is often an emergency protocol, and it might even involve physically disconnecting cables, manual air gapping, to rapidly disconnect the compromised substation or generation facility from the rest of the grid network.
So you create a firebreak.
A digital firebreak. This localized containment prevents the attack from pivoting and spreading to other critical nodes, or worse, across borders to neighboring MCDC member states.
Once it's isolated, the vulnerability has to be fixed, and that fix has to be shared instantly across the entire coalition.
Correct. The MCDC's intelligence sharing mechanism kicks in, leading to coordinated patching across the network. The vulnerability that was exploited in that isolated segment is rapidly analyzed, a fix-a-patch, a configuration change, a signature block is developed,
And that solution is instantly disseminated.
and automatically deployed across all other critical infrastructure nodes in all member nations. This stops the attacker from exploiting that same weakness repeatedly across the entire coalition.
While that's happening, there's also the intelligence gathering for the strategic response.
That's the forensic attribution step. Unified MTDC forensics teams collect immutable logs and network telemetry from the isolated segment. This is incredibly difficult to do in a live OT environment, but it's crucial for determining the attacker's identity, their tools, and their intentions.
And accurate attribution informs the response.
It informs whether the response should be technical, diplomatic, or military in nature. It ensures the coalition avoids politically costly miscalculations.
And the final defining measure of success for this resilient architecture.
The goal is service restoration within hours. Because the systems are built with redundancy and secure backups running on that sovereign stack we discussed, the MCDC can execute a clean restore of the affected segment and bring the power back online quickly. If service is restored before major panic sets in or economic disruption becomes structural, the doctrine is validated.
Moving on to Scenario B, satellite interference. How does the MCDC maintain connectivity when their orbital eyes and ears are being actively jammed or spoofed?
This tests the resilience of the space domain infrastructure. The first protocol has to be automated and instantaneous, switching immediately to backup constellations.
So the system does this on its own.
The ground control station detects the jamming, and the communication traffic is automatically rerouted to a satellite operating on a different orbital plane, or maybe utilizing an entirely separate redundant network infrastructure. The user on the ground, be it a military commander or an emergency service, should experience minimal to zero interruption.
But the threat of adaptive jamming is constant. What if the adversary just follows them to the new frequency?
That's when the advanced countermeasures are activated, implementing frequency hopping to evade jamming. The transmitters and receivers, using their secure timing protocols, begin that high-speed, randomized frequency shift sequence we talked about.
Which makes it almost impossible for the jammer to keep up.
Right. The sheer bandwidth required for a jammer to cover the entire spectrum the hopping system uses makes continuous, effective disruption economically and physically prohibitive for the adversary.
And since orbital interference is an act of state aggression, the response has to extend beyond the purely technical layer.
Absolutely. The framework mandates rapid diplomatic signaling. Using the SSA data to attribute the source of the interference, the MCDC, or its delegated diplomatic authority, instantly engages international channels, the UN, bilateral treaties, to condemn the aggression, demand it cease, and assert the coalition's right to operate freely in space.
It connects the technical defensive action with the necessary strategic and political de-escalation mechanism.
It has to.
Our final scenario addresses the economic front. Scenario C, financial network disruption. How do they protect the economy and, crucially, public confidence when the flow of money itself is threatened?
Here, the priority is maintaining transaction integrity and liquidity. The immediate technical response is failover to alternative rails.
Alternative rails.
As the primary interbank system is compromised, the transaction load must instantly fail over to alternative secure processing centers and communication paths, ideally ones running entirely on the MCDC-vetted sovereign cloud infrastructure. This ensures money continues to move, even if it's at a reduced speed, preventing a total financial seizure.
So you're avoiding that catastrophic system freeze we were worried about earlier.
Exactly. And to protect against a systemic panic, like a bank run, the swift implementation of liquidity protection measures is crucial. This involves central banks coordinating immediately through MCDC channels to inject emergency capital, provide guaranteed electronic transfers, or take other regulatory steps to ensure public access to funds remains stable.
It's about preventing a loss of confidence in the banking system itself.
That's the real goal. And finally, you have to manage the psychological aspect of a financial crisis. A financial network attack is fundamentally a psychological attack.
So the MCDC framework mandates clear, unified public reassurance messaging.
The communication has to be rapid, credible, and consistent across all member states. It needs to explain the nature of the disruption, confirm the security of deposits, and provide transparent timelines for full restoration. Managing public trust is what prevents a technical attack from spiraling into a social catastrophe.
This has been an incredibly detailed exploration of this strategic shift away from purely territorial defense.
It's a huge shift.
We have moved from mapping the invisible battlefield, where cyber intrusions precede kinetic action, to recognizing the fatal vulnerabilities created by digital dependence, and finally exploring the detailed architecture proposed by the MCDC and the monumental effort of building a sovereign technology stack.
And the ultimate lesson, drawn directly from the analysis in the source material, is crystal clear. Sovereignty today is digital as much as territorial.
If you can't defend your data, you can't defend your borders.
Any nation that cannot independently defend its data, its communication spectrum, and its access to orbit is, by definition, dependent. The creation of the digital shield is an absolute prerequisite for maintaining true independence in the 21st century.
This framework is a blueprint for proactive security. It moves beyond simple prevention to guaranteed resilience. It recognizes that in this new domain, security is achieved not by avoiding conflict, but by guaranteeing continuity of function under continuous, relentless pressure.
Which leaves us with this final thought for you to carry forward. If national security now hinges on auditing every line of code and verifying every single chip in the supply chain, what hidden vulnerabilities exist in your daily reliance on proprietary black box technology?
That's a powerful question.
Think about your personal data, the smart devices in your home, or the enterprise software you rely on at work. The future of security, both national and personal, relies less on physical walls and far, far more on the transparency and trust we can guarantee in the code that governs our lives.